Hi, welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we inform, encourage, and support Christian indie writers on their journey toward publication. I'm Christina Catane, and I write in several genres, including Christian dystopian fiction.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Hagerman, and I write fiction and nonfiction.
Hi, I'm Jamie Hirschberger. I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
Hi, I'm Jenifer Carl Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
Okay, so welcome to our podcast. We like to start each episode with a little segment we call What's Up? We check in with one another, see how we're doing on our goals and our personal lives. So what's up, Jen?
Well, I've done good this week. I've had a good week of writing. We actually launched the podcast. We record in advance, so this will come out weeks later from when the podcast started. But we launched the podcast, and that was exciting, and we got some good feedback, and that was really fun. I did a lot of web things for my website, including losing the entire website, like deleting it somehow completely. And thank the Lord that we have our superhero HTML girl friend, Vicky, who came in and saved the day. So it wasn't entirely deleted, but if it hadn't been for her, I would have given up because I would have thought it was deleted, but she knew how to fix it and how to save it. So yeah, it was an honest mistake. Yes, praise the Lord. I was trying to set up the newsletter sign up landing page for people that don't come to the website, that I send them straight to a landing page. And for SEO purposes, which, that's all Greek to me, I needed to have JeniferCarlTong.com somewhere in there, and I screwed it up. But other than that, it's been a really great week. I've been working on my book covers and just having a great week. So, yeah, that's
awesome.
Thanks. How about you, Rhonda?
Well, I finally did launch my blog.
Yay!
I've only got one post on it so far. I've got a bunch in the queue, but I ended up having a really hard time with the graphics. I thought I had them all laid out, and then when I actually published it, they went really wonky. So I spent most of my weekend working on that. And then, of course, spending time with the family this weekend and all that. But I've accomplished a lot of things.
Good.
So I'm happy. Jamie?
I've got a lot going on. Well, if you don't know, like my family just moved to Florida, like transition week is happening right now. So actually it's more like transition month with closing on a house and all that kind of thing. So that's kept me very busy, but I managed to eke out my words. So that makes me happy. And actually I like a lot of what I wrote. So that's also good. So everything's pretty positive. What's up with you, Tina?
Well, I'm kind of in a transition too, although not as drastic as moving to another state. So I feel like I shouldn't complain. But I homeschool, and my son is starting the 10th grade. So we have been getting ready. We started school today. Today is the first day of the 10th grade. And so we have lovely classes that we're taking this year, like chemistry and Latin. So I've only had like 3 glitches this morning so far. So, but trying to get work up to the first day of school, getting everything together, figuring out where we're going to keep our books and where we're going to do everything. And my printer is apparently no longer supported by Epson. So when it didn't work and I tried to update the driver, I lost my driver altogether off my computer.
No.
And I cannot get it to work. So kind of need that to homeschool. It's kind of like a mandatory equipment. So I'm gonna have to go get a new printer, but unfortunately I have to say I didn't do a whole lot of writing, just a lot of preparation for my schedule to be normal, hopefully, from now on. So that's about it. Okay. So this week's topic, that was an awkward. This week's topic is story structure. We don't want to have awkward story structures. No. So, and we're coming up on NaNoWriMo, and so one of the things that is really important if you're going to write during NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, is your story should probably have some structure. Otherwise, you're just going to have 30 days of writing abandon of just randomness. So we want the writing abandoned, but we want the story to make sense, and we want it to actually tell the story. So what does that mean? What's important about story structure? Who wants to field that one?
Well, like I've talked about in the past, probably too much, is when I first started writing my novels, deciding that I was going to be an author. I had the story, I sat down and I just started writing, and it was great for 130,000 words, and I wasn't finished with the story. So for me, structure is, it helps me to make the story. Like, I have the idea, I know what I want to happen, but I have to make it readable for people. So even though I was loving these characters and every little adventure that I was sending them on, it was just this endless episode after episode after episode, and there really was no story there. So I had to go back and figure out, well, what does a story look like? And that's why I think story structure is important, because then the story doesn't go on forever. It actually makes sense and has an ending.
I had a similar experience because I was only writing my novel during Nano, and I was writing the same one every year. And by the time I decided to get serious after I met you guys, I had 90,000 words that were usable, and it was a lot of disjointed scenes that didn't I just had to scrap it. Like, I had to try to figure out what I was going to do with all these scenes, some of them which, didn't fit at all. So
Well, I think that what you are both alluding to is it's really fun to write, but you want people to enjoy the experience of reading your novel. And there's a certain expectation that a reader comes to a piece with, that there would be a beginning, a middle, and an end, for starters, right?
Right.
And if you're just kind of randomly rambling on without any kind of a structure in mind, then it's not a good experience for the reader. Maybe they don't finish your book, or it's kind of like you expect certain things from a song. You expect music and words. And there are, of course, bands and groups that try to do avant-garde things that are just more or less noise, but then they're playing in the subway and not. I'm just kidding. I'm just totally kidding. Like, experimental music, whatever, is fine. But the point is, if you want to be marketable and you want your books to sell and appeal to a wide variety of people, you have to have basics in place so that the reader is not disappointed.
Right. And I think
for anybody who's watched our postcast, there's been a lot of discussion about the novel that my mom and I are writing, about We Write a Cozy Mystery. And none of you, three of you, are not cozy mystery readers. So our intended audience expects certain things that seem strange to you. So we want the people purchasing the book to be, to get what they're expecting.
Right, it's like her Jamie's music analogy. If I turn on the country station and they're playing AC/DC, I'm probably going to be a little disappointed. Maybe.
I think too, also, when we talk about the structure, is that like I mentioned, that mine just kept going and going and going. If I had never found story structure, I think that story would still be sitting somewhere on an old laptop, going nowhere, and I would have decided that I was just never going to be a writer. I would have decided that, like, oh, it's just, I'm not talented, I can't do this, because I didn't know when I first started. I had this image in my head of what writing was, and it was somebody sitting down at a laptop drinking their coffee and, oh, this is a great scene, and it's not like that. It's a lot of work. And so I wonder if how many listeners out there have abandoned novels, have novels that they think they're going to get back to someday, or they've put aside because they just couldn't finish it. And maybe the reason they couldn't finish it was because they didn't have a structure to it. And like Rhonda said, like, she has a certain structure. I have a certain structure of writing romance. Like, there are rules that that you can adhere to, but that you don't have to, like, also tie your hands to as well. So that's what we want to talk about today. Is how each of us have a different structure that we use.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to mention the middle, what we call the murky middle of the story. That was where I was getting stuck, because I knew where I was starting and I knew where I wanted to end up, but it was all that stuff in the middle that I was just kind of rambling on and it made no sense and it wasn't going anywhere. And I think that's where a lot of novels get abandoned, is at that point.
I think so too, and it's because there's not a nice sort of skeleton to hang the meat of your story on, and that's what a story structure will give you, even if it's a very basic structure.
Right. So there's different types of story structure, and we each write in different genres, and so we each structure our stories differently. So let's talk about how each of us structures our stories. Jen, do you want to go first with that?
Sure. So I use just a simple 3-act structure, and I've talked about it before, but even as a 3-act structure, I specifically write it as in a romance genre. So for me, I write, I thought I had it pulled up here. Sorry, there it is. So I write in a 3-act structure, which starts off the first 25%. You start off with your hook and your inciting event, and then it pulls you into your first disaster. And I know that I've used that term before, and it might be confusing, but what I call a disaster really is a plot turning point. So there's so many different resources that you can find online that talks about plot structure, and they call it something different. So to be less confusing, I did create a downloadable PDF for our listeners of what I do, because I kind of already had it in my computer, because I am kind of a nerd like that. I will go in for every novel and I type into these spots what my disasters are. I type in what my I just went blank for a second. My pinch points and that. Thank you. Nope, my pinch points and like that. This is before I even get to scenes. So how I do it is, first of all, I decide what my disasters are. I know who my characters are, and I know, of course, that they're going to fall in love. And I know that I have to have, at the end of Act 1, I have to have a disaster, which is really
and you don't mean like a tornado.
No, that's what I'm about
to say.
Right. So it's really, the first disaster is where it's something that keeps your characters apart. Like in romance, you want them to get together, but not at the beginning, because then there's no story. So at the end of my first act, there will be something that keeps them apart. Usually it's their personal goals that will interfere with the romance, and so that keeps them apart. And then I figure out what my second disaster is, which happens right in the middle of the book. Halfway through will be the second disaster. And at that point, your characters are already closer than they were before, but something happens, and it's usually your something again with their personal goals, or a change in circumstance. Either something happens, like an ex-girlfriend shows up, or one of them has to move away, or they think that someone is dating someone that they're not. Something happens that pulls them apart again. And then again, we have a third disaster that happens at the end of the second act, which is about 75% into the story. And in that one, that disaster looks as if they're never going to be together. Like, there's no way this can be saved. It is completely over because something has happened, or they're not listening to each other. Or, see, the joy of being a reader is we get to see everything, and the characters only see their own perspective. And so as a writer, that's what I have to show. So those are the disasters. Once I decide what my disasters are, then I go back in and I fill in my pinch points, which the pinch points are really when it's not action, it's more about the emotions. So after the first disaster, when they're first pulled apart, you have to start bringing them back together emotionally. They start to connect and start to fall in love, and then you pull them apart again. And then you have another pinch point, and they come back together and start to fall in love, and you pull them apart. So I made the graphic so that it would be a lot less confusing, but ultimately I figure out what my 3 disasters and then my climax are going to be. And then I go back in and find out what happens after each disaster in order to bring them closer together, pull them apart, bring them back together, and then I fill in all those blanks. And like I said, I have a downloadable PDF that we'll share with any of our listeners that would like it. And then we've brought this up before, but this is my what we used to call isolation booth, because I used to put it up in front of me when we would go on retreats and just kind of write behind it. but I took the 3-act structure and put it onto a board so that it was staring at me. And then I could put Post-it notes on it when I change things. I could move things around. And I did it. This here is specifically by chapters for a novella. So it is for 16 chapters, which is about the size of a novella. My novella ended up being 17 chapters. So having said all that, I really want to say that I feel like story structure is important, but it's also not shackles. Like, write the story that God gave you. Use a story structure to help guide you, but don't make it so formulaic that your story can't be written the way that you're supposed to write it. So that, I guess, is basically it, how I do it. And it's hard to just kind of like lay it all out in just a couple minutes, right? Without people asking you questions. When you have conversations with people about how you write, it's a lot easier than just saying, blah, 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 this is what I do.
But if people are writing in your genre or they're interested in that structure and they want to, you know, get a hold of you on social media,
social media
sure you would be willing to answer their questions.
Yeah, social media is great. You can always email me too. Right. My email address is jen@jennifercarl.tong. No, jennifercarltong.com. So people can email me or reach out on social media, and hopefully it'll be a lot less confusing than I am right now.
I didn't think you were confusing at all.
Well, thank you, Tina. You're sweet.
Well, what about you, Rhonda? Let's talk about your story structure.
Okay. Well, I'm a fan of history, and I'm a fan of fiction. I'm a fan of mysteries. And during our retreat, the first retreat that we had, Jamie brought up the Lester Dent model of just a short fiction. I'm a huge Perry Mason fan. Those old courtroom, you know, from the 40s and 50s, 60s shows, the ones that you heard, well, none of us heard on the radio back before there was TV, but a lot of those, they followed this pulp fiction type of theme. So I printed out, I didn't make any sort of a diagram for this because there's so many fantastic ones online that there's no reason for me to compete with that. But I will link to the one that's my favorite that I think is the most informative for me. But anyway, basically what you want to do is you've got 3 parts. There's going to be 6,000 words. You don't want to go over much more than that because this is supposed to be a quick read that people can read overnight and then buy another one. And Lester Dent, the fellow who started this, he wrote in the 50s, and he wrote like 250,000 words a year, and they were all these pulp fiction novels. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with Doc Savage, but that was his guy, one of his guys. So anyway, basically what you do is you divide it up into 3 parts. And the first 3 parts, first 1,500 words, you want to make sure there's suspense. You want to have a bad guy to the hero, and everything needs to happen logically. And the best way to start writing these is make a list of, you want, for every novel, you want to have a different murder method. You want to have something different for the villain to be seeking. You know, the Maltese Falcon, that is always used as an example. And if you haven't read the book, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But anyway, you want a different area. You want a menace, which is to hang like a cloud over the hero. And they're always the fun one for me, I think. So the first 1,500 words, you just want to set the stage and start causing trouble for the hero. Then the second 1,500 words, you do the same thing, but you need to amp it up. In the third 5, I said there's 3, there's actually 4. In the third 1,500 words, it's more of the same. These are so simple to write. They just tell you what to do. So anyway, you just need to make sure that there's more grief always shoveled on top of the hero because he's got to overcome it. He's always got to be the hero at the end. And then in the third 1,500 words, you add some sort of a weird plot twist that never would be expected. Anyway, you just want to keep it from being monotonous. So by the time you get done with the fourth 1,500 words, which will be your 6,000 word total, you want to make sure the suspense held out to the very end. You don't want to add any sort of a prologue to this. There's no, and then they all lived happily ever after, you know, after the end of the, you want the book to end on the action. The bad guy needs to hold out until he can't be killed off in the second 1,500 words. He's got to hold out because, you know, he's the story. You need to make sure everything's all wrapped up with a neat little bow and it's logical. And you need to make sure that the villain killed the hero, not an act of God. You know, a building didn't fall on top of the hero or on the villain. The hero has got to kill him. So there are very specific rules for this. And that's why I enjoy writing it, because I just need to add my words. I don't really have to think about the outline. It's already there for me. So that's Lester Dent in a nutshell.
But I love that it's a format, but when you read yours, it's totally your story. You know, so like, yes, you follow the rules and you stick to it, but yeah, it is your story entirely. So I love that about these.
Oh, and if you watch the postcast, the first two scenes of my first Lester Dent are what we're talking about today.
So go sign up
right now.
Become our patron. All right. Are you all set, Jamie? I mean, Rhonda?
Yeah, that's all I have to say.
So we can move on to Jamie? Sorry, I'm getting you guys all mixed up. So Jamie writes short fiction, so she's going to tell us about that.
Right. I would just say the most important thing about short fiction is to be careful to focus on you're not writing a novel, so you don't really want to try to cover a lot of chronology, if that makes sense. Like, it's very difficult to write something short that takes place over the course of 5 years or 2 weeks or something like that. Most of the time, the story that you are telling is tellable in a scene or two that are pretty specific. But structure-wise, you want a beginning, a middle, and an end. And somewhere in there, there has to be what James Scott Bell calls a shattering moment. We'll link to his book, How to Write Short Fiction and Make Money Doing It. But my big takeaway from reading that whole book was, it's a quick read, was just you need to have a shattering moment. Now, what that means, kind of like Jen's disasters, but on a smaller scale, because we're talking about a short work. So something has changed everything for somebody in the story. And it could have happened before the story even began. This could be, for example, a family dealing with the aftermath of a divorce, or the shattering moment could happen after the story is over. For example, an actor steps out on stage to give the first line to a play. But that's the satisfying moment for the reader that will make it feel like it was worth their time to read your short piece. A lot of times, a lot of short fiction ends up reading like prosaic poetry, because there's not really any story happening. It's just kind of a bunch of words that sound beautiful put together, and then it is presented as a short story. But by definition, a story has starts somewhere and goes somewhere, and things happen along the way. So that's basically the structure that I use in a nutshell, and I try to keep that shattering moment in mind.
Now, Jamie, do you find yourself, is there a certain place that you always put the sharing moment, or do you like to move it around a lot?
You know what? They kind of surprise me. Like, because, okay, unless I'm writing just prescribed, well, I have to do 500 words. I typically have a story that I'm itching to tell. Mm-hmm. And if it's bugging me to write it down, there's a shattering moment in there. And that's really why I'm writing the story, is so that I can share that moment. Right. And so for me, the other stuff is getting me to where I can tell you that really good part. And so it's either in the beginning or at the end, but the rest of it is the trappings, I guess. And that's how it works for me.
That's awesome.
Okay. Well, I was supposed to go before Jamie. I skipped myself, so here I go. You guys are gonna have to fire me as the person who talks.
You're doing great.
Never.
So I'm writing a hero's journey. And so if you went online and you Googled hero's journey, you would find so much information about this that you wouldn't know where to start. I am going to put a link. Like everyone else, I have stuff that I use, and I didn't make you anything like Rhonda said. She didn't either, because there's such good stuff online that you can find, and I will put a link to the one I like best. But basically, Joseph Campbell wrote this book about the monomyth, which is the hero's journey, and it's got 17 stages. So I obviously don't really have time to sit here and give you detailed information about 17 stages of the hero's journey. But if you have ever read any of the Hobbit stories, you have read A Hero's Journey. Those are like the classic hero's journey. And so basically, the story starts out in the real world. Now, the real world is the real world of our hero. So obviously, in The Hobbit, it was the Shire, which is not the real world to us. It was the real world to Bilbo Baggins. So that was his real world, and his story starts out in the real world, and then you get a call to adventure. Some kind of call to adventure invites our hero to leave their world that they know and go out into this other world. And most heroes initially refuse the call. So that's one of the stages. And then they have some kind of mentor or something, which would be Gandalf in the story, who convinces our hero that they need to go, they need to accept this call, and they need to leave their real world and go out into this adventure world. And so there's always some kind of quest, and they go, and there's all the quest part takes up half of your book. The first 25% of your story is going to be the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, and then deciding to go or being convinced to go. Your quest takes up the 50%, and then the final 25% is you have fulfilled your quest, and now you're returning with whatever it is you were supposed to return with. Maybe it's knowledge, maybe it's some kind of object, or it's different in every story. And so then you return to the real world, having gone through this adventure. And there's steps all along the way, like Belly of the Whale is one of them. And obviously you can see it comes from Jonah and the whale. And so there's a death and a rebirth, not necessarily of your hero, although it could be if your story takes place in a magical world. They could die and be. I'm thinking of a scene in one of the Hobbit stories where the female elf queen or whoever she was came, and the guy was dying, and she kind of brought him back. So it's kind of something like that. Or it could be death to a dream and a rebirth to a new dream. I mean, it could be anything. So that's one of them. So there, like I said, there are 17 stages of a hero's journey, and I find that it really helps me when I'm writing. I don't necessarily have an outline. I know what my main character is. I know what the quest is going to be, and I know what I want the final outcome to be. And then I just kind of look at what's the next stage that my hero has to go through. And so that's why I'm kind of a plotter and a pantser mix, because this is my plotting. I look at the next stage. Okay, what does she have to go through now? And then I write it, and I'm kind of pantsing that part. So that is the hero's journey. And like I said, I will put a link. The 17 stages of Joseph Campbell's Monomyth is the graphic that I use. So.
Well, I think that again is really neat how so many different stories can come out of that sort of a structure. Because I know you said The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, but if you watch a lot of, any kind of a movie that is like an action adventure type of, you can watch for the hero to be going through all of these things, or if you're reading a book, and so that can be really fun how it can turn out so differently, even if it's given to the same author to execute.
Right. And if you look at the Bible as a story, it is a hero's journey. It has all of the stages of a hero's journey in it.
That's awesome.
Tina, would you recommend reading the book, or are the graphics sufficient?
I think that if you really, really want to understand it deeply, read the book. If you just kind of want a guideline, that the graphic does a great job.
And since we've been spending this whole month prepping for Nano, and this is like, now we're down to the wire, because Nano is just like in a few days now, maybe our listeners will probably want to look at the graphic, but then go back later and read, because time is of the essence. That's part of the reason why I created what I did, because there are lots of things that I used when I first started studying structure, but they're kind of all over the place. And everybody has kind of a different opinion. And if I was going to represent how I do it, I needed to simplify it way down. because I don't do all there. I mean, there's like 13 or 14 different things that in a story structure that you do if you're doing the 3-act structure, and I don't do all that. I think I do it when I write, but I don't think about it and plan that out. It just kind of happens.
Yeah. And there are many, many different story structures too. I mean, you've heard 4 different options here. All of us have taken a run at like the snowflake method. I mean, find one that works for you is the bottom line, because we just want you to get to the finish line, and having somewhere that you're going will help you to get there. That's really the bottom line of having this episode, is to equip you with information, and so that you can equip yourself with a method that's going to result in you finishing your book.
Right. And as focused as we all are right now on Nano, and that we want to win Nano, ultimately winning Nano is finishing a book, right? So if I win Nano at 50,000 words, I haven't quite finished a book, but that sure gets me really close to it. And finishing and ultimately finishing a book, that's where we want you to be. We want to help you towards your journey toward publication. So if any of these 4 helps you, great. If you find something that you think works and that you would like us to share with listeners, put it in the comments below. We'd love to see it. We'd love to take a look at new stuff. We're always trying new things. I've read the same book that Jamie read by James Scott Bell and was very inspired by it. Even though I'm not a short works writer, I occasionally will write something short like we do every day in the postcast or the podcast here. So you never know what you might read that will just kind of change things for you or help you get past the point you're at right now, especially if you are, like Tina brought up, if you're in that murky middle right now. Don't give up. There is something out there that will help you to get your story finished, because the world needs your story.
Amen. Okay, so I guess now it's time to feed our backs.
Yay.
Oh, good. I'm excited this week, actually.
Are you?
Even though we still only had 15.
Okay. So for those of you that
we're hedging.
For those of you that don't know, every week we have a story prompt that we decide upon, and we get 15 minutes. We don't have time to pre-plan. We just get 15 minutes to write based on this story prompt. And so today we had to write a story in 15 minutes. We're just going to keep saying 15 minutes over and over again so that we can impress you.
Can I just stop really quick and explain the 15-minute thing? We have this rule when we present writing that we are not allowed to say, well, it's not that good. Right. Because we got sick of hearing each other say it, because it doesn't matter. This is a critique group. We're supposed to be sharing and helping each other. So don't say that. But it ended up turning into, well, we only had 15 minutes to write this, so don't judge me. So that became like our scapegoat. So that's why we say
our mantra.
It. That's why we all laugh when we say it. We only have 15 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
So we had to write a story about, did I already say this? Making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Now, in the interest of full disclosure, we decided this a whole week ago, but fortunately, I did not think about it at all until we were planning for the podcast yesterday. And then I'm like, stop thinking about peanut butter sandwiches, because I wanted to plot it out in my head. It was very difficult, but I did end up going a totally different direction than anything I thought about. So
I didn't think about it at all. Blame. Just so you know.
I didn't have time to think about anything.
I try not to think about too much. All right, who's going first today?
I think you should, Jen.
Yay! Yeah, I agree. Right. I second.
Okay, so Jamie's second, and I'll go third, and then Rhonda.
Oh no!
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Jamie. We should make Jamie go first. Has Jamie ever gone first on this on the podcast?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, because she's the one in control of the randomizer that she types the names into it, and miraculously, her name is never first.
Where is she?
Yeah, she's caught. All right, but I will go first.
All right.
Evie pulled the loaf of bread from the cupboard. Cracked wheat. That would never do. Peter always told her that a proper peanut butter and jelly sandwich could only be made on one type of bread. She replaced the loaf and pulled out the Wonder Bread and placed it on the counter next to the Skippy. Not Jif. Evie had made that mistake before. She wasn't about to do it again. She pawed through the refrigerator for several minutes looking for the grape jelly. One time, she had purchased grape jam by mistake. In her defense, Who even knew that there was such a thing as grape jam? And the containers looked identical. But that didn't matter to Peter. It was just another reason to label her a failure as a wife and a sandwich maker. She finally found the jelly on the bottom shelf, all the way to the back of the fridge. It was probably time to clean the fridge out. Peter didn't like it when she let it get this disorganized. But maybe she would just leave it. It probably wouldn't matter after this afternoon anyway. As she slathered the peanut butter onto the soft bread, being careful to spread it all the way to the crust without actually getting any on the crust, she thought about what her life had been like before marriage. She had been a pretty independent woman, a college graduate with a job and a place of her own. She wondered if she could ever return to being that person. She'd like to at least give it a try. She picked up the jelly and stirred it. Stirring it first made it more spreadable and eliminated pesky clumps of jelly. Peter insisted on evenly dispersed jelly on his sandwiches. Evie had learned that the hard way early in their marriage. She stopped stirring long enough to reach under the sink and pull out a box. She carefully measured out 1/4 cup of the unscented powder and added it to the jar of jelly. She stirred again, certain that there would be no lumps. Evie finished the sandwich and threw away the now empty jar of jelly. Yes, she thought, she would like to return to the person she had been before marriage.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh my
gosh. I was trying to keep my face so straight. You guys were like, oh.
Where is the shattering moment? I wonder. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Well, good, because
Wow.
I was not liking that husband. Although
I know.
wish him back
No.
a little, but still, I was sad for her. So good job making us sad for her.
All right. Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm. Yeah, and that short story totally works. Great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I was inspired. I told you guys that I didn't think about this at all, but I was inspired before we started doing the writing activity. Jamie's computer froze, and she was sitting in a dark corner and looked all like maniacal in it. And I'm like, I think that's what inspired me, Jamie. Maybe you were the one making the sandwich. I don't know.
I thought you were going to say that your husband did something really annoying right before we started the podcast.
No, but I really hope he never hears this story because my husband.
You should say, you know how you always ask me if I'm in any of your books?
Is your husband picky about his PB&J?
Yes.
Yes.
I accidentally bought grape jam once, and it was like the end of the world to my whole family.
I thought that sounded personal.
And he won't.
Oh boy.
Then he could say, so is this a story you wrote? You could write, or a warning.
Right.
Oh.
Step away from the rat poison, Jen.
Okay,
Yeah.
he's not a jerk like this guy is, but like the whole bread thing and like that all was inspired by true life. So I hope he never hears the story.
Well, it's public now.
It's very good. It's a very good story.
But if he does hear it, I'm probably never gonna have to make him a sandwich again for as long as we're
There you go.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. So I'm second. We both went the relationship angle. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
Okay, so I'll read mine to you. It's just a moment because I want to be able to see your faces and my screen is too big.
Ooh, that means there's a really great shattering moment.
Yep.
Maybe not. Just I like to see your.
We should do
You're
an
so
entire.
pretty.
We should do an entire episode just about short stories and talk about shattering moment and about the different parts of short story. That would be fun to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I will say it's hilarious to look at this. I know I've already submitted it and it so badly has some bad spelling. So when you read this, oh well.
We only had
15
15 minutes.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. So you ready?
Mhm.
Yes.
She took the butter knife from the drawer and then slammed it shut. She grabbed the bag of bread and flung it on the counter, ripping it open along the side instead of filling with a little plastic clip that cinched the opening together. Behind her, sounds of the big game filtered in over and under the batwing doors that led to the living room. No good, worthless son of a honey, could you bring us each a beer when you come back with those sandwiches? Her husband called. Sure, she said, slamming the jar of peanut butter onto the counter. She wondered how long he was going to let her rage. Not long, it turned out. She heard the bat wings creak open as she uncapped the raspberry preserves. Her husband's arms snaked around her waist. His chin went to her shoulder. Babe, he tried. Don't babe me, she said, even though her body became electrically alive everywhere he touched her. Slathering 4 slices of bread with peanut butter. She knew the back and forth motion of her elbow was making her husband's head bounce up and down, but she did not care. Why you mad? He asked, placing a line of tiny kisses up her neck and then gently biting her earlobe the way he knew she liked. You realize I have a knife, she said, fighting a smile. His right hand ran a circle just above her belt buckle, and his left lifted the mass of curly brown ponytail that was denying him further access to her sensitive neckline. She sighed and set the knife on the counter. Against her better judgment, she allowed herself to sink back into him. You not mad now for sure, he said. She could hear the wide, toothy grin in his voice. Why did you have to bring him here? She asked. Isn't it enough to take our leftovers to that fleabag squatter's hole of his? Do you have to bring him here to get sweat and dirt all over my throw pillows? I'll wash the throw pillows, he whispered, and the S sounds he made sent shivers down her spine. It's not just that. He's got that stupid vape thing out around the kids. Tony's at a real impressionable age. We just don't need that kind of influence around here. I'll give Tony some money. Send her to the mall. Let those mall rats influence her instead, okay? It's just, she was interrupted by the force of being spun around. Before she could blink, she was staring into those 2 long-lashed pools of espresso, and he had his forehead pressed up against hers. Her mind was abuzz with the same static she felt every time he held her. His hands were hot on her back. Her body tingled. He's family. He's down on his luck. I just brought him here for some sandwiches, okay? Just sandwiches, she said, the magnetism of his closeness overwhelming her sense of reason. That's right, baby, he said, brushing her lips with a feather kiss. Just sandwiches.
Wow.
I was getting a little worried because
I know.
Christian.
I'm really glad it was just a short story because I'm not sure where it's going next.
Oh my word, I don't know who to have sympathy for.
I agree.
I love both of those characters. I totally sympathize with the wife, but I love the husband.
I agree with you too, but I'm kind of like the opposite. It's not that I love them. It's kind of like they're both kind of like, I almost feel like they are bad for each other. Almost like she's mad and he knows how to manipulate her through just physical touch.
Right.
And here she's got children that she's concerned about, and he's willing to just send them off to the mall. So I don't know. Like, it makes me want to know more about these people.
Yeah.
But I think that if I know more, I'm going to dislike them. Yeah. It's so good. Like, there's so much here.
Me, so
I feel bad for the sweaty guy on the couch.
I do too.
Like, he's down on his luck and he needs somebody to help him. He needs more than sandwiches. Anyway.
Yeah, it's so funny because I really like this couple all of a sudden. You know what I mean? Like they didn't exist an hour ago or whatever, however long this has been. But so thanks. I'm glad that you guys also enjoyed that. I don't know. See, I feel like they're obviously newly married or something. I don't know.
I think they've been married a long time.
Maybe. But they have a teenager who they would send to the mall.
That's true. Yeah.
Or it might not be.
Could be a stepkid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I mean, she just said the kids are around. She didn't even say it could be like a niece or nephew or whoever. Anyway, the point is they seem very real to me, this couple. So anyway, sorry. Toot my own horn.
No, they are very real. Don't toot your own.
Yeah, it was really good.
Toot away, sister. Toot away.
All right.
Who was next?
I guess it's my turn.
All right.
Yay.
Yep. Mine is sort of about a relationship too. But you don't see much of the relationship. But you'll see what I mean when I start talking. Okay, you ready?
Ready.
Athena sat on the kitchen floor with all her supplies arranged in front of her. 2 slices of white bread, a jar of peanut butter, a jar of jelly. That seemed to be all she needed as far as she could tell. She picked up the family-sized peanut butter jar and hugged it to her chest, holding tight with one arm to keep it from slipping while she attempted to screw off the lid. When she tried to turn it, the whole jar turned with it and fell out of her arms into her lap. Moving her bread to a different part of the floor, she set crisscross applesauce and put the jar in the middle of her legs, holding it tight between them. Then she used both hands to unscrew the lid. At first, it wouldn't budge, but then it moved just a little bit, and then a little more. Soon it was turning easily. She set the peanut butter down beside her and picked up the jelly, repeating the same procedure. It was a bit harder to hold the jelly between her legs sitting crisscross, so she straightened them out first. The jar was sticky, and grape jelly stained her white tights and hands. She thought nothing of it, but spread her legs out to a V shape and put all her supplies back in front of her. One of her pieces of bread had some dirt on it, so she turned it over so she couldn't see it. Then she picked up the peanut butter jar. Daddy usually used a knife, but Athena wasn't tall enough to open the drawer and get one out. She pondered only a moment before plunging her hand into the jar and pulling out a handful of the thick brown substance. She did her best to spread it on the bread, getting it on both sides in the process. She set the side with the least amount of peanut butter down on the floor and wiped her hands on her tights, getting much of the peanut butter off, but not all of it. Then she picked up the jelly. Her hands were too big to get the whole thing in the small jar, so she tipped it and scooped it toward her bread with 2 fingers. A huge gob of grape jelly fell from the jar onto her bread, seeping over the sides, which made it very difficult to pick up the piece of bread. So she picked up the peanut butter piece and plopped it down onto the jelly one. It was crooked. She did her best to straighten it, patting it over and over again with her chubby little hands. Then she stood to her feet, bent over, and picked up the sandwich. She toddled toward the living room where her high chair was, leaving a trail of grape jelly, which was leaking from her sandwich, down the front of her dress and dripping onto the laminate flooring. When she reached her high chair, she lifted her sandwich high above her head and put it on the tray. Half of it sagged over the edge, and grape jelly dropped in clumps from between the bread onto the floor. Athena went around to the other side and climbed up the high chair, scooting under the tray before twisting her body so she was in the right position and seating herself in the proper place. There was a huge gob of grape jelly on her forehead, where it had dropped when she lifted her sandwich up onto the tray. She wiped it away, smearing it into her hair. Just then, Grandma woke up from her nap nearby on the recliner. "Athena, eat!" announced the little girl proudly.
Yay. I just have to say, if Randy read that, he would need therapy after. It's crooked. It's the wrong kind. It's 2 handfuls.
Oh, my word.
That is very adorable.
That was so adorable.
Really,
I
really.
love that story.
Please tell me that actually happened.
I could see it.
No, but it's what I would imagine what would happen
Right.
if Athena tried to make herself a peanut butter jelly.
Because it's really funny when it happens to someone else. So
Yeah.
I especially love that Grandma was closely supervising the entire ordeal. You know what? There is like a weird sound happening here, and I hope it's not some kind of weird tornado warning. So give me just a moment. I don't know what's going on.
Sure, we'll pause. Everything good, Jamie?
Yes, it was the doorbell. I'm such a Michigan person. You guys were doing the podcast, and there's a lizard on the window, so I'm like, lizard, because I am not from here. I'm sure Floridians are like, yeah, it's a lizard, but I was all like, okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, did everybody say how great Tina did? Yes. Now, you did great.
I thought that was a really great story.
I don't know if I had a shattering moment.
I
think Grandma waking up.
Grandma waking
might have
up
been
for
a
sure.
shattering
Oh,
moment.
okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
That's awesome.
I really
All right.
regret going after you guys.
You always say
All
that,
right.
and it's always
Yeah.
great.
I know, and I
It's
always
always
do it
good.
too. Okay, so I had 15 minutes and 15 seconds.
Yes, we did give you an extra 15 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Jamie, listen to my first line. She absentmindedly pulled the silverware drawer out. The clank rattle it makes when you pull it out. Hang on, let me start that over. She absentmindedly pulled the silverware drawer out. The clank rattle it makes when you pull it out too far made her jump. She sighed. I chuckled. She's always been jumpy. That drawer has made that noise as long as I can remember. He never got around to installing those newfangled soft close drawers he admired so much in my new build. She always makes me a bologna and cheese sandwich. That real thickly sliced kind, and a dill pickle. My mouth was watering already. She went to the cupboard and pulled out the peanut butter and the grape jelly. That sounded good too, but that pickle had my mouth watering. She pried the paraffin off the jelly with a knife as she looked out the window. Those cardinals are finishing off the seeds. We'll have to get more today, George. She looked at me and smiled a little. Beth. The toast finally popped, and she dipped the knife into the peanut butter and pulled out a large glob, smeared it on one piece, and wiped the knife on the napkin, then dipped out a large, shimmery, jiggly glob of jelly. My jelly never looks like a jewel. Hers looks like you could wear it on a necklace, I thought. She put the two pieces together, cut them, and presented them to me on one of her grandmother's last remaining saucers. With a great sigh, she sat herself down across the table from me. I looked at the perfect sandwich before me. I'll be George today. That was it. Handwritten.
Oh my goodness, that was so good.
Yes.
The jeweled jelly and the paraffin lid, like you just know you were at Granny's and that he didn't get to do the drawers. Oh.
Yeah.
I honestly, like, I was following it and I'm like, what are the drawers and who's he? Like, I didn't until the very last sentence. What a great shattering moment. Yes.
Because these fake people, she was going to make the bologna sandwich, but absentmindedly, she was always making a sandwich for her husband, and that's what she, he just
right
so
in the
sweet.
gut.
No, we totally caught it. Like without having to say it, you totally showed us that he just died. Yes, so beautiful.
Whole world there in just that many words. That's very, very excellent.
Yes, love it.
You need to enter that into some contest somewhere.
Yeah, it was good.
My jelly never looks like that.
And I will.
It wouldn't be the same kind of contest. Like,
That's
I
true.
have to enter mine into the PG-13.
Sensitivity, you mean?
That is so great. I love my jelly never looks like that because you kind of tell a lot about the narrator at the same time as you are saying that she obviously made the jelly. Like the paraffin lid was, and then one of Grandma's few remaining plates. Because you say you're not good at description, but you do just enough. Like you say the right things. Like you didn't tell us what color the plate was or what the pattern was, but you said it was one of her grandmother's last remaining. And you're like, that's an old plate. And that's what's important. You know what I mean? Anyway, very good.
I agree.
And so each of us pictured our own grandmother's old plate.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
true.
what we pictured.
And the paraffin wax stood out to me too. Like that immediately was like, oh, because people don't really do that anymore. Even when I can jelly, which I do, jelly and jam, believe it or not, I don't do the paraffin. I do a regular canning jar. So like my grandmother always did the paraffin wax. So yeah, that was
and
great.
I was trying to figure out, I was trying to get a whole story written. So I know I left a lot of stuff out that I would have if it was a longer story. But I was trying to decide if I should note the difference between she's got the paraffin, but my jelly always has the two part lids on it, and I didn't know how to add that in, so I just left it out.
No, I think it's beautiful just the way you did it. Yeah, I don't think you needed it at all.
So beautiful. Yeah. It was enough to just say the color is never as good. Like it was just really well done. Very well done. Wow.
Well, thank you.
Awesome.
Great.
Okay, so is everyone's back fed?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, so it's probably a good time to announce our first ever live broadcast.
I'm afraid. No.
Be very afraid.
Oh, what about accountability corner? We forgot about accountability corner.
Oh.
Are we doing that today?
Okay. Yeah, let's do accountability corner first, and then we'll announce our first ever live broadcast.
Ooh.
Sorry. So let's start. We're gonna check in with each other and see how we're doing toward our goal of publication. Rhonda, you want to start?
Okay. Well, all right. So this summer has just been, I just have gotten so far off track from my writing goals. And even my bullet journal, I scribble some things in there, but I am not as detailed as I used to be. And I really need the detail. So I have gone through and I've revamped, I've added my new goals, and I'm getting back on track, not just because of Nano. It's sort of like the beginning of the school year for me, but just because I have other things that I want to do. My number one goal is to be a successfully published author. You know, I'm not going to be like, I don't know, Ayn Rand or Agatha Christie or whatever, probably.
You could be.
But, well, I could be. You never know.
You're talented.
But, well, thank you. But anyway, I just need to get my butt back in the seat and out of the garden.
Well, and what I think that you are right. I'm not going to let you off the hook about that, but I am going to say you are going through a lot more than just your garden. Like, so you've moved your house, right? Like you've moved into a new house. And then just before that, your last child at home graduated high school. So you've been in a really long sort of a transition-y sort of a period. And your goal when we first got together, you said, now that I'm done being mom, and like you're not ever done being mom, but you know, the work of mom, like raising children, now that I'm done raising children, I want to be like a writer. So for you, this has still been a situation of like, well, how do I make that fit into like the other things I want to do in this new phase of my life? So like you need to have a little bit of grace with yourself and not be too hard on yourself for it taking some time. But I do totally agree with Jen that like now that you're like, oh, I want to make this a total priority, you're gonna, man, that short piece you just wrote is exactly the awesome that I've read in your stuff. I know people are gonna read it and love it and just eat it with a big spoon. So good for you.
Very high praise for you. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I do not feel left off the hook.
What's that?
I do not feel left off the hook. So
not in this group, never.
Right.
Okay, well, I guess it's my turn to be held accountable because I did terrible this last week. I barely wrote anything.
So what is it? What's going on that why, I don't know.
I just feel like I feel like I can't complain because you guys have these huge transitions you've gone through. But it is a transition going on right now because of starting school, the end of the summer. I just got a new job. I didn't get a new job. I got a new car. My husband is a pastor and in between churches at the moment. So it's kind of a limbo kind of place I've been living in. And I'm hoping that will no longer be the case by the time that this broadcast airs. Like there's some light at the end of the tunnel for that. Like we might be having a position. And so I'm also, half of my house is packed, you know.
And has been for a while, right?
For a while in anticipation of moving. And so, like, when we went to go start school, I'm like, oh my gosh, where's my 3-hole punch? Like, I didn't think I would need that. I thought I'd be moved by now. So, you know, to most people, 3-hole punch, no big deal. But when you have binders and you're trying to put papers in the binders, you need your 3-hole punch. And I didn't know where it was. So it's just kind of these little things that are just.
Well, and I think what you're struggling with is you've kind of drifted away from your concrete goals. And so we're doing a whole goal setting type of episode next week. I think once you have some deadlines that you're holding yourself to, you'll be a little more productive. Because I think that summer happens and we all just get like, hey, whatever, you know, hang 10, everything's relaxed. And so maybe getting a little more structure in place will really help you.
I think now that we're going to have a schedule, our days are going to be scheduled because of starting school, and I can decide my own schedule because I have a car and I don't have to rely on someone else for a ride. I'm hoping, and I bought a bullet journal, and Rhonda promised me a lesson.
Yay!
Oh, yay!
I'm ready.
All right.
Well, if the viewers would like to see a Bujo episode, they should comment, and maybe the two of you can put something together while you're teaching Tina. Maybe
sounds good.
Maybe, yeah. So, I haven't been very good, but I am going to. My goal is starting today. I'm going to write every day.
All right.
So, on my novel specifically. Okay. What about you, Jamie?
Well, it's good and bad. I have been writing every day. Hooray, that's great. I do not feel happy with the progress on editing the next book that I want out. I am going to be a little gracious and say, yeah, like I literally have not been in the right headspace to do that because it's been really hard just getting out 500 words. So I'm kind of trying to have grace for myself, but as things start to even out now that this big move part is over, there shouldn't be any reason why I can't commit some time to moving forward on that. And I'll be very excited to talk with everybody next week about what my deadlines are for actually having that finished because it's been languishing far too long. The good news is I'm really happy with the edits that I have made. Hooray!
Yay.
Can I just say how impressed I am that like you were driving to Florida and you wrote in the hotel room?
Yes, absolutely.
I probably would have just blown it off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. Well, yeah. Well, I just kind of want to write every day. I just kind of want to do it. So I am, and I hope that I can keep writing every day. That so far is the plan. So, but thanks. That's great. What about you, Jen, again?
All right. So before I share my goals, I want to talk a little bit about what we just talked about, all three of you and your goals. And so Tina, you said you want to write every day, and Rhonda is gonna, get back to writing. And I feel like the thing that has changed me in the past few weeks is that I gave up I'm going to do 3,000 words this week, or these huge goals that I had that I've been able to meet before, but not every week. And so Jamie has been consistently doing 500 words a day, no matter what. She does not go to bed until she's got 500 words a day. And I thought, you know what? I can do 500 words a day. And that's what I've been doing. Sometimes it is 500 words on a blog post. Sometimes it's 500 words in a free write of things that I want for a future novel. But I'm making sure that I'm writing every day, and it helps to keep my my brain glowing. We talked about that in an earlier episode. Maybe you guys should pick a number. Maybe 500 doesn't work for you, but maybe 300 would. And I know a lot of times, Rhonda, that you will write by hand. 500 words is really only 2 pages written.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that and pray about this week, because I found that if I do at least 500 words a day, I generally do more than that. But that if I get at least that much done, I'm getting a ton more writing in, and I'm getting to the point where Jamie is, where I want to write. I don't want to go to bed until I have it done. And I find that it motivates me to get other things done in my life too. So all that said, I know you guys can do it. All that said, my goal is 500 words a day, and to get my book cover done, along with all the podcast stuff that we're doing. But I can have the cover done in a week. Actually, when we get off of here, instead of editing this podcast, I'm going to work on the cover. I'll do the podcast later. So that's where I'm at.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can talk about on October 31st, starting at 11 p.m., and going to midnight, and maybe even a little after, we are going to have our first ever live broadcast of the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. And it is going to be a countdown to NaNoWriMo. Because NaNoWriMo starts, National Novel Writing Month is in November, and it starts at midnight, right when the clock goes from 12 to 12:01. In November, you can start writing. So we are going to have a kickoff party.
Yay!
Yay! We'll have to have some snacks of choice to show everybody.
We have to have snacks.
Yes.
Because I would like to point out that I think that the original idea about having a live broadcast came from me, but the original idea to do it at 11 o'clock at night did not come from me. I think that my friends here conspired against me, because they knew that I would be tired, and they know what I'm like when I'm tired, so they want to have it on video.
It's going to be hilarious.
Yes, you must watch. It's going to be must-see TV, even though this is not TV.
I don't know how much of it you'll be able to understand, but
I really wanted to do this because I'm usually up anyway on whatever, Halloween
October
night, like
31st.
waiting for it to turn November 1st so that I can start my story. Because, I mean, you heard me trying to think about peanut butter, trying not to think about peanut butter. Like when I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go. So I'm usually writing right away. So we might even end the whole session with a writing sprint that we do live. You could join us and then let us know how many words you got done in the writing sprint at midnight. Fun. Get a good start to your whatever. Is it 1,700 words a day that you have to do during Nano?
1667. But that's a really good point. People might not understand. The fact that we're doing this live means that you'll be able to communicate with us. There'll be a live chat going on. We might have Riley awake, Jamie's daughter, monitoring it for us because we'll be too busy trying to be coherent at 11 o'clock at night. They'll be fine. The other three are going to be perfectly fine. I'm the old lady, not technically, but in spirit, I am the old lady of this group. And if it's past 8, I am tired. So we'll see.
This one time we were doing a planning session and it was like after 9 and Jen was like this. I'm like, you're sleeping. She said, I am not sleeping. I'm like, you totally were just sleeping. She's like, okay, so what were we talking about? I'm like, how you were sleeping?
It's so lame, but it's so true.
Take a nap.
Yes. And I'll have lots of coffee. Which
and your kids are off school the next day, so you don't have to get up. So
right. Yeah. So,
and I know that I'd made the suggestion of we should dress up because it's Halloween, like a character from the story we're going to write for Nano. So I don't know if you guys want to do that. I don't know. Jamie writes some like science fiction-y type stuff. So
this is true.
She might come as like weird.
Can I just put a filter over this that makes it green or something?
There you go. Okay. So if you want to know the details of exactly what's going to happen and where you can find it and what we decide our theme's going to be if we're going to dress up, subscribe to our newsletter on our website and you'll get the details. Also, stick around for our postcast. This is exclusive content that's only available to our patrons on Patreon. So if you are not yet one of our patrons, go over there, sign up, and you can watch our postcast where we are going to actually have a actual critique of some writing that we've done. Not the fun kind of critique that we just did in our backfeeding session. So you're going to want to check that out. Anything else, ladies, that we needed to talk about?
Nope, I'm super excited about next week, honestly.
Me too.
I am too. This concludes the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. So until next week, may your pen be prolific, your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ.
Amen.
Bye.
Bye.